Welcome, everybody. My name is Charmaine Nelson. I'm a professor of art history and a Canada Research Chair in Transatlantic Black Diasporic Art and Community Engagement at NASCAD University, which is in Mi'kma'ki, which is the unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We commonly refer to it today as Halifax, Nova Scotia, but it is the land where Indigenous people have lived for millennia, of course. I would like to just take a moment to do more than the normal passing over Indigenous, you know, acknowledgement. We're going through a very profound moment right now in Canada, as many of you joining us from elsewhere probably have heard in the news. The Guardian has covered it extensively in other newspapers as well here at home in Canada. It's something that I'm grateful that people cannot look away from. I want to mention that, of course, the 12 million African captives who survived the Middle Passage went on to experience colonization in the Americas. And that meant from Argentina to Canada and the Caribbean. And we lived, our ancestors lived side by side with Indigenous peoples. Both groups, of course, were colonized by various European empires, and Indigenous people were sometimes also enslaved alongside Black Africans who were always deemed to be enslavable. So of course, then what happened across 400 years of transatlantic slavery was that Africans and Indigenous people did not only become allies, they became kin, they became family under the burden of colonization. Black Canadians and Blacks in the diaspora understand the pain of our Indigenous brothers and sisters who are working to bring the remains of their children home from the unmarked graves of Canadian residential schools right now, those who never returned from the heinous government-sponsored residential schools. It's very fitting that today in Canada, when we look at the landscapes of monuments, that monuments to the architects of the residential schools have been often defaced or pulled down by the public, who is asking for more and for better and wanting redress. So Canadians then across the country and Blacks in diaspora and Black Canadians, of course, are thinking about and talking about and looking to these histories as our Indigenous brothers and sisters, of course. There are histories that are too often refused. All right. So I just want to wrap up here before introducing our brilliant fellow by saying that as people in Black diaspora who were often or too often refused the basic human rights of bearing and caring for our dying and deceased loved ones, we share with Indigenous populations across what today is called Canada, your grief, your sorrow, and your anger at this residential school history, and we stand in solidarity with you as you push for redress and reconciliation. So I want you to now, without further ado, introduce one of the brilliant fellows at the Institute, one of two artists in residence who have joined us this year. And I should point out, of course, the Institute was just founded in 2020. So we're just thrilled to have been able to welcome so quickly in 2021, the first cohort of 5 fellows. That has included 3 graduate students and 2 brilliant artists in residence, one of whom I am thrilled and honored to introduce right now. So Tonya Paris, also known as Sam Guan, is an established Mi'kmaq and African Nova Scotian artist, activist based in Nova Scotia, Halifax, Nova Scotia, which rests, of course, as I just mentioned, on the unceded traditional Mi'kmaq territory. Over the past 5 years, Sam Guan has had several art exhibits and installations within the Nova Scotia community, most notably her contributions to the Dalhousie University Architectural Building, the Nova Scotia Queen Elizabeth II Mental Health Unit, and in 2017, when she received the Bronze Medal for the Visual Artist of the Year from the Halifax Coast. So exciting. In 2019, Sam Guan was invited to be the guest speaker at York University and the University of McGill for her work with the Proclaiming Our Roots Archive project. Her most recent projects have been her contribution to the award-nominated 2020 Aboriginal Public Television Network production, Racism Lives Here Too, with Trina Roach and the production of season 3 of Diggstown. Sam Guan is Indigenous artist, consultant, and primary contributor to the hit television series set to be featured on Fox and BET networks in 2021 and 2022. Sam Guan is passionate about equality and empowering others through education and art, and she is a regular collaborator with Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center and is known throughout the community for her commitment to seeing positive change. So I'm going to hand over to Sam Guan now, who's going to speak for about 40 minutes. And please write your questions in the chat, or if you feel comfortable at the end, we can unmute you and have you ask your questions directly to Sam Guan. So Sam Guan, thank you so much for being here. Over to you.
Hi, sorry. Are you able to hear me okay? Okay, unmute myself. You able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening. My name is Sam Guan. Also Tonya Paris. I've been doing artwork my entire life, but this project came to me earlier this year, and I'm excited to be able to put forth my voice as well as my artistic talent, and hopefully in turn, another young person of Black or Indigenous heritage sees how easy it is, well, I won't say easy, that it can be done, let's just say that, and that they look at it and see that they can do it as well. I'm starting with my project tonight. It's called Freedom is No Game. As a descendant of a residential school survivor, our family was traumatized with this as well. I'm also a descendant of, I'm Black, so I'm a descendant of the African diaspora as well. So putting those two things together actually made an entire community that fit its own. Here in Nova Scotia, I would say what we call the Black Indigenous community as well. Although we're not all recognized as being Indigenous, we all know that we're Indigenous as well. So hopefully you guys will like what I have to show you, and we're going to start with our first piece. I don't know if Jesse has it up on screen yet. Which piece is it, Jesse? Because I can't see. I'm sorry. Okay. Here with us, I'm sorry. I have someone on the other side. And let me start, I'll do this, I guess, while we're doing that. I want to give thanks to different people that helped me with this project. One being Dr. Charmaine Nelson. Thank you so much for this opportunity, as well as NASCAD University and the Institute for the Study of Canadian Slavery. Without them, I wouldn't have the platform that I have right now. So I do want to say thank you for myself, as well as the future people that are going to come in and do this project as well. Jesse from Dreadlocks and Kindness, thank you so much. Without him, I would absolutely have no picture, no frame, no video. It would be, everything would be black. I am not tech savvy at all. I would also like to thank my mom for pushing me, because I wouldn't be here. She wasn't in my ear, even though I don't always like her. I love her for what she does. Sobaz, for actually kind of pushing me on this project, because I wasn't sure if I was gonna apply for it. And then when I got accepted for it, I was over the moon. Let me see, I'm just trying to think while we're doing this. Joy, for all my photos, all the photo shoots, all the pictures that she does. Tara Taylor, thank you so much for making sure that this today happened. For the board, she was in collaboration with me to make sure that we had a light show to go along with the piece that we're doing. And just everybody that has supported me along this way and along this journey, and that continues to support me and always have my back. Thank you so, so much. Because when you're in this game, sometimes you feel like you're alone. So it's always good to be able to look out over the audience and know that you connect with someone and that they're there for you. And before I get started, I would just like to give thanks to the Halifax Public Library for giving me this space and giving me the opportunity to be Sam Guan. They've always given me the platform to speak out, to say how I feel without any restraint. So I want to thank the library and their staff for that, because we've been working together for a little over a year now. So this just kind of brings it all home for me. And with that said, we are going to get started. with the pieces above the board. Okay, so I came up with the idea to do Freedom is No Game because in all honesty, I'll start with my younger brother passed away a little bit over a year ago. And one of his favorite games to play was chess. So it was something that we sat down and we kind of taught ourselves life over the strategy of learning chess. And this was something that we held dear to us. It was an inside joke. So when I did start this project, I looked at the overall of slavery, of the residential schools, of the trauma that we as Black people and as we as Indigenous people, and then twice as much as Black Indigenous people have to go through here in Canada. Well, here on Turtle Island, but here in Nova Scotia for sure. So when I look at chess, I look at it as strategic. And I know that when we go through life, we strategize everything from infancy to middle school to high school to university to know exactly where you want to be in life. And so this is why I chose to do it this way. I feel that if Black and Indigenous people work together and they have each other's back, that there's nothing that we can't accomplish. If you look at Nova Scotia, within 30 minutes of every reserve is the Black community. And there's a reason for that. I don't know the exact reason, but there is a reason for that. We've been here together, working together for over 500 years. Most families can go back approximately 9 generations or so on paper. So with that said, I thought me being both Black and Indigenous, this shows both my heritages. It allows me to appreciate who we are, where we came from, and why we are who we are today. And most of all, my existence is the resistance. So me being who I am, being Black and Indigenous, being a woman and being able to speak out, considering 70 years ago, we weren't even allowed to read. 70 years ago, my grandmother was in a residential school. 70 years ago, her family wasn't allowed to be together. So for me to be able to sit here today and present this and speak about it, just goes to show how far we've come and also how strong we are to get here. So does that? Yes, he knows I don't like to talk a lot. So this is the first introduction. I know that I'm in live time, but there's also another picture coming up for you. This shows the board on both sides. So normally you would have 2 groups of the board facing each other in combative form. The way we lay the board out is they are facing away from each other, because if you aren't looking at each other in the game, then you can't play. If you can't play, then you're not part of the government conspiracy of which was set to set us apart to each other. Hence the name, Freedom is No Game. If we want to be free, we have to take our freedom. We have to take the freedoms that come with it, freedom of speech, freedom of media, and obviously freedom of art form. And so this has played a big role for me from the beginning. So we can start with individual pieces and why I chose those. In the background, you will see that, and we set them up backwards just so you are aware the pawns are behind the royal family. So in the back of each of the royal families is a pawn. On the Indigenous side, you will see that it's the shape of Canada and a different Indigenous tribe that was affected by the residential schools, that was affected by the government, had survivors as well as victims. And these are the nations that had to bring their babies home this year. So we have over 7,000 babies that were found. And these are the tribes that were mostly directly affected by that here in Canada. My grandmother is of Cree Nation. So I do have Big Stone Cree, which represents my nation. We have the Iroquois Nation. We also have Mi'kmaq Nation, which is, we are a Mi'kmaqi, so we have to make sure to represent them as well. We have Sioux Nation. We have the Mohawk Nation, which is mostly known for our nation's warriors. Anywhere there's a fight, you definitely have the Mohawk Nation right there. And I do a lot of work with Ganawaki Reserve, so I had to make sure to represent them. We also have the Inuit, the Sioux, and I believe the Métis Nation. So these are the nations I know directly that have descendants of the residential school survivors, because I have mutual friends or friends with people that are descendants of these particular tribes. I chose to go with that because as pawns, we are moved around the way the government wants us to be moved around. from having to receive COVID shots to having to receive certain things, getting certain benefits if you're in certain areas. And so this is why I chose to do that, because they've been using us as pawns in their game of chess. The next in line would be the rooks. As you see, it's the medicine wheel with the feathers. The reason that I chose those to represent the rooks is because it gives a little bit of power, and there's a little bit of power in our voice. So on the indigenous side, the medicine wheel and the eagle feather is of great importance to the indigenous people. It also gives you strength, and it allows you to have that unspoken voice that normally doesn't get heard. The next would be my knights, which are the drums. Of course, chose the drum for battle cry, for battle call, for home, for protection. That's what the drum in the indigenous community is used for, is so that you know we're here. And that's pretty much how to describe the knights on the board. They protect. Next in line would be the indigenous baskets. That would also be our bishops. So medicines, foods, supplement for the people, which is what that position is supposed to play on the chessboard. And last but not least, on this side, you have your king and queen, which are handmade dolls by myself. Every single piece of the clothing was picked specifically for these dolls. I want to say I have to give honor in representation to my uncle George Amato, who was chief of the Cree and Mi'kmaq and Métis Nation in Alberta. This particular rawhide and breastplate was fashioned from the outfit that he himself wore when receiving his chief headdress. The female, which is also the queen beside him, is also dressed in rawhide. She represents the residential school victims, as well as survivors, with the colors that I chose for her, which is the orange and the turquoises. She also holds a smudge bowl and an eagle feather to represent healing amongst our tribes, and that we're going to have to do it together as a unit. We were broken as a unit, we're going to have to heal as a unit. So that's on the indigenous side of the chessboard. On the African side of the chessboard, we have 9 different countries chosen that were affected by the Transatlantic Slave Trade. Each one was chosen based on the history and the knowledge that we have here in Nova Scotia. One was chosen specifically because we went back and started to progress and rebuild ourselves, which is Sierra Leone. But also we have the Gambia, we have the Congo, we have Nigeria, Ghana, Guinea, and Basu. And I'm just trying to. Okay, so we'll go back over it, but each country was chosen for the amount of people that they lost during the transatlantic slave trade. With them, again, the rooks comes our voice and our power, which is our first level of royalty, is owning who we are. I chose to go with the Pan-African symbolism because once we found power in that, we found unity with each other, and then we gained a voice. And not only did the Black people gain a voice, but everybody else joined in that voice. So when we see the Black fist, or we see the Black, green, and red, we know that it's meant to be healing, and it's meant to give us a voice from the past traumas that we suffered. Again, I chose the drum. And again, so guys won't know this, but I did choose the drum from him again to represent healing, protection, war. It's to acknowledge that, and to acknowledge the warriors that we have in our community, because each one of us has made our own steps and have made our own things to make this a better situation for the next generations. And I consider myself a warrior. So I want to acknowledge all those people that took that next step, made that voice, wrote that post, did that spoken word, sang that song. They deserve that acknowledgement as well. And then we have, again, we would go with the bishops, which would be the baskets, which are made from, if I can't see it, they were actually sent in to me from South Africa. So I'm really excited about that. I do have knowledge in the native tradition of basket weaving, but not the African tradition. So I thought it would be best to get something authentic It made more sense to me, and it made the piece feel more realistic. Again, to show substance, survival, resilience, and the fact that we can make it through anything, especially together. And then again, with the king and queen, I took my time on both the king and queen for both sides. I wanted the essence of who we were as Black people. I wanted the essence of who we developed and who we became as Black Nova Scotians as well, because there's a lot of pride in that. We've struggled a lot. We've came through a lot. We're looking at Africville, Beachville, all these different Black communities around us that were taken from us because, to me, they seen the strength in the community. And the easiest way to cut down the strength is to cut out the heart of the community, which is the church. So that's where they went first. I was raised with the people from Africville. So we were raised with the ideology of what Africville meant for us, what Africville meant for them, and where they are now. And I also see the trauma that has transpired from what was taken from these people and what was, the land that was taken and the separation of families. It's not the same. And we need to address that together again as a whole, if there's a strength in numbers. So that's why I chose to do the pieces that I chose to do for this presentation itself. Overall, well, I guess I steal something a little bit from my mom. I'm too Black to be Native and too Native to be Black. And so I am a direct progress of both of those communities. There is a large community like myself that falls somewhere in the middle. Society wants us to always choose one or the other. But the great thing about being biracial is we don't have to, right? We don't have to. And there's a bonus with that. We come from two strong communities that work together. We come from two strong communities that support each other, two strong communities that are there for each other. And as a bonus, I think that the generational trauma can start to end with us. Right? Speaking to my grandchildren, speaking to my children, acknowledging who we are and the stories and traditions, take a big toll in that. My Uncle George, who really started me on this journey, my mom was always there, but my Uncle George, there was just something about our relationship. And I remember he looked at me and he called me his little Indian girl. And I have a ball cap that says that because of that. And he pushed me to be who I am and to embrace all of who I am and to love my copper skin and my curly hair and to accept my Indigenous heritage, even though the world didn't accept it. It wasn't about them. This was about me, right? And my healing and my trauma. And so if anything that I do can help another young woman like myself or a young man like myself or non-binary, transgendered, it doesn't matter. If it can help someone else to heal, to put some of the pain behind them, some of the broken behind them, and to heal the next generation, because that's what it's all about, is paying it forward, right? Everything that I do today is meant to help with the traumatization of the next 7 generations, because there is going to be trauma. If we're dealing with trauma now, there's no way that our future generations are not going to deal with the after effects of the trauma that we're dealing with now. So what I'm trying to do is stop some of the trauma, so it's not as traumatizing for my grandson or his children or his children's children. And I think that as individuals, that's what we're here to do, is to make it easier for the next group that come in behind us. So I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not a super public speaker. I can speak to the public. It's not my favorite thing to do. So I am here doing this for you guys, but I prefer behind the scenes and to kind of do what you see on the table. I don't think that a visual of who I am is what's going to make the change. I think the visual of what I can do is what's going to make the change. And we're always told what we can't do, but never shown what we can do. And I want to show what we can do, because this was definitely a team effort. Again, I have to give thanks to the entire team. I have so many things are booked completely next year. If it wasn't for Dr. Nelson, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't see these things on the table. If it wasn't for Emily, if it wasn't for my other fellow team members, Bruno, Jason, who have been a huge inspiration in this piece, definitely. a huge inspiration. We wouldn't see the changes. And if we each do our small little part, then together we can make a wave, right? Each of us might be a little ripple, but you have 15 ripples and now you have a tsunami, right? So I think that we need to hold each other's hands, lead each other, be each other's light in the darkness, because we all have that dark place that we go to. So when you can pull someone forward, lighten the load a little bit, I think that's what we're meant to do. And we need to do that as a village, because it definitely takes a village to raise a child. At least I know it did for me. So, no, it definitely takes that village. And unfortunately, we don't have the same types of villages that we used to have. When I think of that, I don't know if anybody remembers, but we used to have heritage commercials that used to come on TV. And there was one particular one where the guys came off the ship and he said, you know, about the village. And he said, Canada. And he said, oh, we're in Canada. And the shipmate said, no, I think he meant the village. I don't think he meant it's the same thing. It takes a village. For me, from Mulgrave Park to Uniacke Square to Hammers Plains to Africville to North Preston, East Preston, Cherrybrook, Lakeloon, Weymouth Falls, Truro, New Glasgow, you name it, they played a huge part in developing who I am, where I'm going, and where I've come from. And all of those things are important to who we need to be productive people in society today. And hopefully I bring that energy forward and people pick up off that energy and bring it forward with them as well.
That sounds great, Sam Guan. Are you ready to take questions then? Would you like to start with some questions?
Yeah, I'm great.
Okay, fantastic. So if anyone has questions you want to, if you're shy, you want to type them in the chat, I can read them for you. Or if you want to put your hand up, the wonderful tech person, Karen, can unmute you and you can speak directly to Sam Guan.
I got to thank Karen because she put up with me for the last couple of hours of not knowing what I was doing. So thank you, Karen.
So I can start. I can start off. Let's see here. So it's really obvious the beauty of the piece, Sam Guan, and also there's a really the specificity of the Indigenous and the African aesthetic. I'm wondering if your choice of materials also have symbolic weight, or if you can talk us through what is everything actually made from?
Well, we use oak, cedar, ash, rawhide. There's sage in the baskets, sweetgrass. Just trying to think what else. The authentic kente cloth came from Bernadette Hamilton Reed. So I do want to give a shout out to her for that. So I thank you for that. We have the baskets that came in from South Africa, the beads that came in from Ghana. And I specifically went because I wanted traditional pieces. I felt that it was important for proper representation and authenticity.
Oh, fantastic. And then we have a question from the brilliant Professor Alice Jim of Concordia University, who says, thank you, Tonya Paris, exclamation, exclamation. Such wonderful words. How do you play this game?
Well, you can play it the same way you play chess. Everything is turned around for aesthetic purposes, for the purpose of the actual setup of the pieces. But every single piece is there for you to actually have a real chess game if you choose to. But the thing is, with our installation, if you want to play chess, then you got to learn a little bit of Indigenous and Black history.
Right, right. So as the people are playing then, Sam Guan, they're becoming more familiar with those histories? Is that the part of the goal?
Yes, because we want people to acknowledge the things that we learned sitting at our grandmother's table. We're finally in a position where we're able to speak out and say these stories and tell these histories. And so we want other people to engage in that as well.
Fantastic. Okay. So I'm still waiting for other questions to come in. So I'll jump in and ask, so can you situate for us, Sam Guan? So you've been a practicing artist for, you can let us know for how many years now. So what is the nature of your practice overall? And then where does this piece fit within it? So do you usually work in this kind of performative manner with, as a multimedia artist? Do you usually do video work, performance art? So can you kind of give us kind of a lay of the land, and how does this piece fit or not with what you usually do?
I'm a visual artist, so I like to work in several different mediums. I get bored very easily, and the great thing about art is that there's so many different mediums that as soon as something you lose an interest for, say, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, you can pick something else up. So from beadwork to sewing, sculpting, and putting things together is kind of my thing. Figuring out how something works is what I like to do. I don't usually like theater visual arts. So this part, the presentation part, is a little bit out of my comfort zone. I prefer to stay behind the scenes and allow people to see pretty pictures.
Okay.
And the other thing too is what I am wearing today is also a piece of mine that I actually made specifically for this show when I was accepted by NASCAD and you, Charmaine. I specifically made it then. It represents both earth and water, which is completely me. So it was another way of showing what I can bring to the table, but also showing young people that even as an artist, you have the opportunity to be all over the board. And if you see something and you love it, try it. The worst that can happen is you never do it again because you don't like it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Wonderful. And Professor Jim just responds to your response saying, love it. And maybe it is about playing with each other and not about winning, question mark. Can you speak to that? Because for most people, they see chess as like a competitive or combative sport. And of course, you've lined up Indigenous and African pieces. So can you talk to us about the nature of actually what you've assembled as a game that has a certain strategy behind it?
So the reason that I chose chess is because strategically, as we're growing, we know that there's a certain middle school we want to go to because school can offer. You know that the high school you're going to choose is because of certain, athletic teams or artistic things that are going on in the school. And then you also sit down for years and decide what university you want to go to based on what it is you want to do in life. So life is very strategic in how you break it down in order to fulfill those things. So when I play a game of chess, that's kind of how I look at it. You move one piece in order to be able to move another to make what you need to happen on the board happen. So even though some people can look at it as combative, I look at it as strategic. And for me, my brother and I always chose to go through life like a chessboard, and we kind of played off of each other that way. So that's why I chose the chessboard, because you can make a million moves and still get a checkmate. It's not always going to be the same every game, and you can still win at the end of the game. So for me, it's like I was 41 when I decided to be what I would consider an artist, when I decided that it was going to be the first and foremost thing that I wanted to do. And that was strategic for me at that time. Right? Like I knew where I was and where I could be financially. So I set myself up for that. And it was because my mother was in my ear constantly saying this, you're good at this, do what you love. And so eventually I was able to put myself in a position where I can do what I love every single day. And to me, even though I was up till 4:30 this morning, making sure all the pieces were together, I still don't feel like I worked. I still feel like I was doing something just because I love to do it.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful because, Sam, going like so many people in the world, and because of circumstances, because of where they're born, because of their identity. And we see it heightened in the pandemic too, when we talk about, people who have public facing jobs who can't sit at home behind a computer. But sadly, so many people in the world hate what they have to do to make a living. Right? So it's like actually a chore. It actually really is a job to them. And then their free time is them trying to do as much as possible of what they actually love. So what a joy it is for you to speak about this as being something like, you're running on pure adrenaline now, I'm sure, saying that you were up till 4:30, but you look so brilliant. This, your joy in your work just shines through. So I think that's so tremendous. Can you talk a little bit more though about what you really, in the little we've been able to talk too, which has been so interesting for me, you have a completely non-traditional path to how you came to be this practicing artist. Is there any of that, a little bit more, you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience? Because I think it's such a brilliant and interesting history.
I never wanted to be an artist. I didn't. I wanted to be everything, but I joined the military at 17. My mother said, be an artist. I joined the police department at 19. My mother said, be an artist. I moved out of the country and to the US for many, many years. And the whole time, my mother was on the phone saying, and you're gonna be an artist. I came home, had my children, grew up and had life experience. Now I'm an artist. I think that before, I didn't think that I had enough to give the world. I didn't think that I had enough together in order to offer somebody something. And now it's different. You know, you go through life changes, life experiences, having children, growing up, different jobs, traveling all over the world. And now I feel that I have something to offer to the next generation, even if it's just don't do what I did.
That is so fascinating, that your background in policing and military, and then and what's so profound too, you've mentioned several times family members who are instrumental in reminding you of who you are, what your potential was, and that art was something that was in you. And I think that's really important too, because I think, Sam Guan, in a lot of Black communities that are first, second, or third generation Canadian, in my experience as an art history professor, I'm often talking to my students who are asking me, please tell me a strategy for how to tell my parents that I am an artist, or that I'm an art historian, or that I'm a curator, and that's okay, because I'm getting pressure to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, right? The typical things that sometimes immigrant families associate with success. So I think it's so important that you come from a family where they saw that in you and nurtured that in you.
Oh, I was blessed to come from a background of activists. So it was always about speaking your mind and being your true you. One thing, anybody who knows my mom, she's sitting in the audience, by the way, or she might have stepped over my nephew, but anybody who knows my mom lives in her truth every day, all day. So there was no choice for me but to live in mine, because I wasn't raised to do anything but live in it. And I was blessed enough that I had, people, strong people around me like Rocky Jones, Joan Jones, Lynn Jones, as much as it is Eddie Carberry, people, he stood his ground. Uncle Eddie is still fighting for Africa to this day. I think it's been 35 years, and it may have been longer, but I know for a fact that I've physically seen him fighting for 35 years. So when I look at the people that raised me or that influenced me, and they're still fighting, then how can I possibly give up the fight?
Fantastic. Fantastic. So I'll remind people that if you have any questions for Sam Guan, you can type them in the chat and I'll read them out. I'll just throw out one more here. And if we don't have other questions, I'll have Sam Guan wrap up as well. So it's clear that you have a sense of responsibility in your cultural practice, and what I'd even call like an ethics in how you do things and why you do things. Can you talk to us about that, and how you situate yourself with regards to your practice in terms of, what's clearly then a morality around what and how you do it?
Well, being raised in my great-grandmother's kitchen, I was blessed that I was raised until mid-teens with my great-grandparents. It was all about the 7 grandfather teachings. It was all about being strong and having wisdom and being courageous and being thoughtful of other people. One of the things that she always taught us was that, you treat people how you want to be treated, and you teach people how to treat you. So if you're good, people are going to be good to you. And if you don't tolerate not being treated well, then people will also be good to you. So either way you look at it, it's a win-win situation.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you for that. We do have another question from the audience under the name Vita Plume. And Vita is asking, I'm wondering where this piece will live. Will it be shown, and where? And where can people actually play this game?
Well, I've been asked so far by Halifax Public Libraries to show it here as well. So we will be talking about time frame. Definitely will be shown again July 1st at the Invest for Nest, or Invest in Nest, sorry, Black Tie Gala that we're doing at the Lighthouse. Is a theater, would be considered art center, sorry, which is July 1st. So this piece will be showing, but also a Black and Indigenous version of Ava in Wonderland, which is also by me, as well as my line. I will be showing that night as well. So there'll be approximately 10 outfits done by me and 2 art installations that night, as well as another several other artists as well. And
Fantastic.
February here at the public library as well.
Fantastic. So there are multiple opportunities, and Sam Guan will ask you to give us that information so we can get that up on the web pages of the Institute for the Study of Canadian Slavery. And so everybody can check that out in case you weren't able to jot that down, so you can follow Sam Guan and her work. And of course, we are trying to keep you apprised of what Sam Guan is doing and the other 4 fellows on our social media, on Instagram and Facebook, and the web pages as well. So any last concluding remarks for us, Sam Guan? Any more wisdom to share with us tonight?
I have a question that I'd love Sam Guan to answer. This is Emily here.
Oh, Emily.
Oh, I don't know. It's Emily.
Yeah.
Well, you alluded to it briefly, but I just thought it would be wonderful if you could share a bit more about like what the connections with the other fellows were, because I've been a research assistant at the Institute for the Study of Canadian Slavery this semester, seeing these wonderful fellows interact with each other and spin ideas off of each other. And you mentioned it a little briefly when you were talking about your gratitude and thank yous, but I just wondered if you could give a little more insight into what some of the connections that you that being in this fellowship with these other 2 fellows brought out.
Okay, let me see. I'll start with Bruno. Bruno is a plethora of information, like from databases. I mean, every news article about slavery that you could possibly absolutely think about between here, the Caribbean, Brazil, Cuba, Bruno has access to. So I felt the need to stay on the same ball that Bruno was carrying. You know, he works diligently, he does a lot of research, and I wanted to make sure that I kept the same pace, I guess, that Bruno was making as well. Jason and I, Jason's into fashion, and that is a visual art, so it was a little easier for me and Jason to kind of have conversations just because they were both visual, and with Bruno, it was more research information. But both of them played a pivotal point in the end result of this as well, especially with the traditional pieces for the King and Queen with Jason, some of the talks that we've had, and to make sure to go back and do my research that I had everything done properly with the information that Bruno came forth with.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emily. Can I just say too, how thrilled and proud I am of Sam Guan and the other fellows for being in conversation and supporting each other. Because as you can imagine, this year with the 5 fellows, 3 right now, 2 starting in January, going till April, they're virtual. Sam Guan is in town, but Bruno's in Toronto, I believe. Jason's in the UK, for crying out loud. So, you know, for them to stay in contact like that, to support each other, actually is taking an additional amount of effort that once, you know, we're post-pandemic and the Institute infrastructure exists, they'll actually have desks and office space side by side, and it'll be a no-brainer because they'll be sitting there having coffee together, having lunch daily. So, you know, hats off for the work that you put in.
I'm sure we'll be in even once the physical location.
Great.
Yeah, now I think you're kind of stuck with us.
Oh, we want to be stuck with you. Seriously, what you guys have done this year, you've set the bar very high for the next cohort. So thank you so much. And thank you, Emily, for that prompt. So Sam Guan, any last words of wisdom from you?
Well, I'm looking forward to working with those guys again in the future. We've already established a relationship, so I know that we're going to do some future endeavors, as well as yourself and the team itself. Like now that I'm like, you know, now that we're there, you kind of got us. So to be able to do future stuff and to work on things that we see coming up, or, you know, collaborating and doing things together, I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm also looking forward to seeing the other new residents and artists that come in, you know what I mean? And just, you know, being aware that I'm always there to be able to work with the other artists and residents as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And let me just see here. Question on behalf of David Saparoli. Have you thought of making a game using Indigenous languages? Obviously, it would need to be a collaborative project.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm open to work on all of that. I do enjoy the languages. I think that those are things that we should be involved in as well. I am not fluent. I do have people that are fluent, but I am not fluent. I can understand the conversation more than I can speak back the conversation.
Right, right. So that would be a really interesting project to collaborate with some other people on. Yes, fantastic. So before we go, I'll just say the next fellows talk, Emily, maybe you can type it in the chat. I think it's in mid-January. Jason Cyrus is the last fellow from the first semester who's going to be presenting in January. His fellows talk, we've already had, of course, Bruno presented already, Bruno Veras, and the wonderful Sam Guan presented this evening. So if you want to check out what's going on at the Institute, if you just put in your Google search or whatever internet search, NSCAD for Nova Scotia College of Art and Design University, you will see a link to the Institute on that first page, on the home page. And then you'll be able to go there and see the fellows, see their bios, see the activities, see when upcoming competitions come forward, see an event that we're planning, and just get a sense of the mandate of the institution and our vision going forward. So thank you all so much for attending. I know there's many, many things you could be doing, but who wants to miss the fantastic artist that is Sam Guan? And thank you, Sam Guan, for all that you've done and for your energy and enthusiasm, for being an amazing artist in residence and one of the first cohort of the 5 fellows. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I hope to see you again, welcome you again to future events at the Institute for the Study of Canadian Slavery. Have a great night.